20% off all my merch. Use code MAY4.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Hey everyone, how are you all doing today? Okay, so after the insane Episode 9 teaser trailer, there are dozens of theories floating around the internet, revolving around the same premise, Palpatine having returned in some sort of way, playing on the very first theory that I had started the channel off with, that Palpatine learned to transfer his essence to another body. Sure, we've exhausted that theory, but there's one theory that no one really has thought of, and finally, as I sit here in my hotel room at the end of Celebration after meeting literal thousands of you this last week, my brain is ready to do what it does best, and crank out the theories for the next 7 months. So we all heard the laugh at the end of the Episode 9 teaser. We confirmed it's Palpatine. Ian McDiarmid showed up on stage himself to basically confirm this. J.J. Abrams and Kathleen Kennedy have both confirmed that he's back in the flesh and not some sort of Force ghost or something like that. So, let's begin. Palpatine lured Anakin to the dark side with the promise of having the knowledge to cheat death, telling him about the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise, who manipulated the midichlorians to create life. He never taught Anakin this power, who later went to become Darth Vader and lose to Obi-Wan, becoming half the man he was. Why he didn't teach him? Well, I assume it's because he always wanted Anakin to grovel for more information and keep these secrets on a taut rope over his head so that he would obey. Let's say Palpatine knew how to cheat death. Alright, there are plenty of theories we could come up with. Essence transfer, potions, dark alchemy, ancient holocrons of knowledge, so on and so forth. And today in this video, I am going to list every possibility and go into depth on all of them to tie it all in together to one, letting you be the judge of how you think he'll be brought back. This video will be long, but it'll have it all. Now, one theory is something many who haven't read the comics won't know about, and it's probably my main theory in this, at least one of the main theories in this video. Lord Momin. You guys remember the Darth Vader comics I was covering a while back, right? He was this ancient artist who was obsessed with worshipping the dark side of the Force. He would make art that would represent evil and darkness. For example, he tried to literally wipe out a planet by freezing them at the last point before death, saying their expressions would be a piece of art for the dark side of the Force. The guy was nuts. He learned how to transfer his spirit into his helmet, and whoever wore the helmet would become him, or rather allow him to return no matter the point in time. The helmet was a possessed object and something that Palpatine surely would have known how to duplicate. He knew all about this, and we actually see this in one of the old Lando comics, which was also canon. What if the Knights of Ren, who all wear masks, are like this too? What if they're just a bunch of Lord Momins who worship the dark side and are working their magic to open the portal between life and death, to bring Palpatine back? In fact, Momin actually ended up bringing himself back in the flesh. What if Palpatine did this possession thing to an object on the Death Star? And Rey goes there, as we've seen in the original concept art for Episode 7, as she dives into the ocean and goes pretty much to the throne room, which they're now obviously using for Episode 9, and she touches something. And then she gets a Force vision, kind of like she got with Anakin's lightsaber, or Luke's lightsaber, but this time, it's all dark side stuff. She then could become possessed by Palpatine and allowing him to return through her body. Possibly something calling to her like the Skywalker saber did. Something I'd like to mention is that did anyone ever notice that only once Vader asked Luke to help him take his mask off was he fully able to turn back to the light? Is it possible to say that Palpatine made Vader's helmet possessed with parts of the dark side and kept him trapped inside that black tomb that he wore all his life? Palpatine could have done this very same technique. Now, at Vader's castle, we had a portal underneath. A portal into the past that could bring back anyone. Lord Momin promised Vader that it could bring back Padme. Although, of course, when Vader actually goes in there, his soul is separated from his body, and he becomes Anakin once again, only to find that Padme is kind of this weird possessed demon creature that kind of hates him, and then she kills herself.
I don't know you. Anakin Skywalker is dead. No! Anakin shouts as Padme throws herself backwards off the balcony, turning into a demon of some sorts with yellow-black eyes, as she chokes herself to death, falling and falling below, making Vader relive what he did to her. As she opens her eyes, only to be incinerated into dust by the lightning bolt that strikes from the sky, turning to ash before Anakin's eyes. No! He shouts, over and over again, destroying the ground that he stands on. Looking down the balcony, he sees a young blonde-haired boy holding a blue lightsaber. He had never seen him before, but when he tried to get the boy away, he was overpowered, being blasted back to his body outside of the portal. Summoning his severed arm and lightsaber back to himself, he ignites it and destroys the portal forever.
It was extremely dark, and I was actually really happy to see that in a Vader comic because that's the kind of darkness that we need for his character. Now, Palpatine could possess someone through an object or mask, open the portal, and bring his younger self back. Unlimited full power. That would be my favorite theory, to be honest. I mean, just imagine we get like a young Palpatine, just after he killed Darth Plagueis, maybe even before the Phantom Menace, or maybe even a little younger. Full power, kind of like we saw in the comics, where he cloned himself and came back. Another theory is that he simply didn't die. We've seen it time and time again with Star Wars. I mean, Darth Maul survives being chopped in half, falling down the shaft, hitting his face and skull along the way. He lived. Vader gets chopped into 3 pieces, burnt to a crisp to the point where his organs are actually cooked, ears are melted, eyes are almost blind, and lungs are scorched to the point of failure. Yet, he becomes the most powerful villain of all time. Then we have General Grievous. This was Palpatine's first test with cyborgs. He had Dooku plant a bomb on Grievous' ship before he was a cyborg. The results was pretty catastrophic. Grievous was no longer an organic Kaleesh, which is his species and where he's from. He was left to pieces. Dooku, at Palpatine's orders and the technology of the Separatists, put Grievous back together with state-of-the-art technology. Now, this wasn't the same type of tech used on Vader. He got some archaic things because Palpatine just really was upset with him for losing to Obi-Wan and kind of wanted to punish him. The point is, Grievous was literally just organs. This can even be seen from the General Grievous comic that I covered a little while back.
He reaches into the waterfall again when he is teleported.
Have you come seeking knowledge, power, truth?
I come seeking nothing but their destruction, he claims, as the voice says.
Destruction, yes.
As his armor begins to be stripped off of himself, he's given his old body back, looking at his organic hands again in shock. Grievous says he's only improved himself with these cybernetic upgrades. However, the voice shows him otherwise, continuing to strip away everything inorganic from him.
You seek to destroy a power you don't comprehend. You have carved away your own connection to it. But your understanding is not strength. It is small. You are small. That is all you will ever be.
Palpatine was the Emperor of the Galaxy. He was the most respected, feared, and in control of everything. He had access to all forms of knowledge and power and money. He had the Royal Red Guards who lived to keep him safe. The guards would be the only ones who wouldn't have run off during the destruction of the Death Star. They would have saved Palpatine, or at least tried. Either collecting him once he fell, while Luke carried his father to the ship and brought Anakin back to the light. There, they'd take him to one of his many galactic outposts, where he would be admitted into intensive care. He'd then be sustained via cybernetic implants, and, in a bacta-tank, giving us a type of super mech Palpatine. He'd spend the next almost 30 years hiding out and getting others to be the face of the new Empire, while he pulled the strings in the background, and thus getting the First Order, such as Snoke and Hux, who was the son of Brendol Hux, the man who was also part of the Empire. The third theory I have is kind of a mind twist, and it's that the Palpatine we saw at the end of Return of the Jedi wasn't really the real Palpatine. What if that Palpatine who Vader killed and threw down the shaft was just a clone? Let's not forget, Sidious was the pioneer behind having the clone army created, and he had the access to all the technology. In the Force Unleashed game, they used this technology over and over again, with constant failure, I might add, to create the perfect Force entity, Starkiller. Who's to say Palpatine didn't use this for himself for Return of the Jedi? Here's why. He, like Snoke, saw into Vader's mind. He knew his every intent. He felt the conflict within him from day one. He told Vader that Luke would come to him. How did he know that? Because he's the Emperor of the Galaxy, and he can see into people's minds. He saw into Anakin's and knew about the dream, maybe even planted the nightmares in there in the first place. In Legends, one of Palpatine's powers was the ability to read people's minds and see into them very easily. Let's not forget, he was extremely powerful. Knowing how Anakin is and knowing that Luke was coming there, he for sure knew that Anakin had some doubts and conflict within him, for sure. Thinking something might go wrong with Vader as Anakin kept trying to poke through, he probably would have taken some precautions. Now I think, and of course this wouldn't be my last theory, so take it as just that, an interesting theory to think about, I think that Palpatine in Return of the Jedi told his clone to go and sit there at the throne, and if all went well with either Luke killing Vader and taking his father's place at the Emperor's side, or Vader killing Luke, then the real Palpatine would just switch places later on with his clone, and no one would be the wiser. Or if things went the way they actually did in the film, which is what he envisioned, and Vader turned his back on Sidious, killing him, turning to the light, and dying as a Jedi, then Sidious knew his plan had saved his life. Now, he needed to go into hiding and find a way to regenerate himself somehow. I mean, Star Wars is a galaxy where clearly anything is possible. Robotic limbs, clone armies, moving objects with your mind, and alien planets. So the idea that someone can't take some futuristic type of stem cell injection to de-age themselves while retaining their brain would be a bit funny to rule out completely at this point. This coupled with the fact that he had one of the most brilliant masters of all time, Darth Plagueis, who learned how to cheat death, it would seem more than likely that Palpatine had the ability to, in fact, cheat death. Now, let's say he's not a clone, alright? So this brings me to the next theory here, and that goes all the way back to before the Phantom Menace, where he had constructed some super top secret laboratory on Jakku that no one knew anything about. Something I'm thinking is that he was using ancient Sith knowledge, along with his master, Plagueis, to devise or construct a way to A, create the perfect Force entity, the literal embodiment of the Force like Anakin, and B, his ability to transfer his mind and soul into that new vessel. Now, this has been done in Star Wars back when George Lucas was still the owner, and it happened in the Dark Empire comic series that I mentioned a little earlier, where Palpatine returned with a handful of younger cloned versions of himself, all in these tanks. Luke turned to the dark side for a minute, then turned back to the light to kill Sidious for good. So what if in that lab he had created on Jakku, he tried to create the embodiment of the Force only to constantly fail until making Rey? Or what if he just kept trying to clone himself until he got it just right? Snoke, well, he was just a minion. He wasn't a Sith, but he was powerful in the Force. He had the ring that was from below Vader's castle with the inscriptions of the Dwarti, which, as you know, the Dwarti were the golden statues in Palpatine's office, which were originally belonging to Darth Plagueis, and we find out about this in the Darth Plagueis book. Once Sidious killed him in his sleep, he took the statues and put them into his own possession. Perhaps he had a connection with the inscription of the Dwarti and gave Snoke his powers through him, or possessed him. Maybe Snoke was Sidious all along, and he needed to die in order to be free of his weak old body so that he could go into another vessel. Perhaps the reason Rey was dumped on Jakku was because she was the Force entity that was created in the lab, and she was a defect. Maybe her Force powers were just dormant and they couldn't be detected. So, they set her free. Or, a more plausible reason was because the project worked and she was hidden on the planet as a slave. I think everything revolves around possessed objects and the ability to transfer one's essence in some shape or form into a stronger vessel. And I think this is why Palpatine was so obsessed with finding a younger, more powerful apprentice all the time. If they use the continuity of the comics, which are newly canon, then we could have the possession of perhaps Snoke's ring, which is from Vader's castle, or some other object to influence a character and make them do things they wouldn't normally do, or bring out their darkness within. I also think we'll see many flashbacks of Palpatine and Vader either together or separately, with footage never before seen of Anakin. Now, what I think will happen, and I don't know how it'll happen, is Kylo is going to be redeemed to the light, Rey is going to turn to the dark side for a moment. Either she's going to be possessed, or she's actually just going to turn evil, and Leia is going to pass away, unfortunately. And I think through Leia's passing, Kylo will be turned to the light, and he'll have enough of this darkness, and he'll finally see the way he should be. Then perhaps young Sidious comes back, because I just think that would be really cool, and him and Rey kind of team up to fight Sidious, or maybe he has to fight Rey with Sidious inside and get him out of there somehow. So those are my top theories for how Palpatine will return. I hope you guys enjoyed them. Let me know what you think is the most plausible, or if there's one that I didn't even mention and you guys are feeling that one. So hit like on this video, please, if you enjoyed it. It took me a real long time to come up with these crazy theories, but hey, that's I guess that's why you subscribed, right? So thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, remember, the Force will be with you always.
Now, fulfill your destiny.